My name is Ellie Gold. I'm the president of the Gold Institute for International Strategy here in Washington, D.C. And today we have an interactive briefing regarding the state of law enforcement in the United States. Before I introduce the discussion, I just want to let everybody know and make this disclaimer that our speakers today do not represent any police department, any government agency. They are here on their own. All are retired law enforcement. And actually, three out of our four panelists today, I would venture to say, represent the Gold Institute for International Strategy, if they're representing any institution at all. In recent years, and increasingly during the past year, the apparent relationship between law enforcement and many localities across the country have become strained, with increased calls to defund the police. The rise of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and the reluctance to utilize National Guard for the violence on January 6th, and the subsequent enlistment of 25,000 National Guardsmen. The role of law enforcement really needs to be discussed. What we're going to talk about here today is just get the perspective of law enforcement to see what the state is of the internal policing that we have today, and what needs to be changed, at least internally. Now, Robin Gritz, who's going to begin, is going to start with about between 5 and 7 minutes of her thoughts as from the perspective of her time at FBI. She was a supervisor, special agent, counterterrorism division, unit chief, executive strategy unit, and a supervisory special agent in the Washington field office. Robin, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello. Good morning, everyone. From Austin, Texas. Yes, I was with the FBI for a little over 16 years. Prior to that, I was with the New Jersey State Probation Parole for 4 years. So I have 20 years, over 20 years in law enforcement. I moved to Texas to take a position as a contract employee to Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, and I was a special advisor on human trafficking here. So I have a bit of a state level and federal level in my experience. I also hold the master's degree in criminology. So that's from like almost 20 years ago, but I don't want to age myself. I have a unique experience because of what everyone sees in the news about the FBI. It was an amazing career that I had. I worked overseas, counterterrorism, anything that blew up. My squad was the one that responded. If you've seen the movie, well, I don't look good on close up. If you saw the movie The Kingdom, that was my squad. So just top of the line, cream of the crop agents and analysts that worked on that. I have been seeing, of course, it's all the deterioration of what was going on in the FBI when I was in, and specifically the leadership. And I saw a lot of, I saw the morale go down the tubes while I was still an FBI agent. I tried to change that as a supervisor. I chose not to move up into the SES ranks because I didn't even submit my KSAs, because I felt that the agents doing their job, they need the support of people that are leaders, that are willing to get them what they need to get to their job done. After I left there, I did a lot of contract work in dealing with cases and dealing with local law enforcement, and just meeting a lot of really amazing police officers that went into their line of work, specifically up in Boston and down in Florida. And one of the officers I met was about to retire when Boston bombing happened, and he pulled his retirement papers, and he also came off of vacation leave when that happened. And you know, it was his dedication, his motivation, and just his personal belief in the mission of what he was working. What I've seen over the last few years is that the Constitution is that law enforcement is almost being pushed politically to go against the freedoms that are secured by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And then we're ending up with civil disobedience to the point of us being under attack. Specifically here in Austin, we did have a riot. They call it a peaceful protest, but when individuals are throwing their human feces at the police, I don't call that as a peaceful protest. So we've seen the emergence of Antifa as being a guiding force for a lot of these protests and for also attacks on officers. Unfortunately, we've seen that with BLM. The organization itself has a great mission in bringing equality forward. However, it just has not worked out that way. And I will just mention the name David Dorn, a retired police officer who was murdered during one of these riots and was filmed dying on the streets. I also would bring up the, we don't see this very often. It hit me, even though I've been out over 8 years, hit me really hard to see the 2 FBI agents killed in Florida recently. They were there protecting children. They were there, they were specialists in the Innocent Images program, which goes after those that want to do harm to children, sexual abuse of children. And we saw there that the perpetrator used his doorbell camera to watch our agents and take them out and have no problem with doing that. You used to never see, you would never see that too in one day. It just showed what has been fostered in some of the communities out there, that there's no regard for our lives, even though we put our lives on the line for people. I would also bring up in Houston recently, we had 2 police sergeants killed in the line of duty within weeks of each other. One of which was Sergeant Preston, who had an encounter with the suspect the day before he was killed. They arrested him. The DA's office declined prosecution, even though this guy was waving a weapon around and everything. And the prosecutor's office said, give him back his gun and the bullets that were in his pocket. And he used that gun the next day to murder Sergeant Preston. So we have an issue with, even in our DA's office, of these type of policies that not only hurt the rule of law, but get officers killed. My agency actually, that I was just working for, arrested, I think it was 5 illegal aliens in a 1-bedroom apartment, basically a flop house, who had a sub-teen, 13, 14 years old, who they were raping repeatedly and trafficking. They arrested these guys, I wouldn't say gentlemen, they arrested them, these sick individuals, and before a few hours were up, these individuals were released because they were legal aliens. And the policies here in Travis County and in Austin just have stopped them from holding anyone that's illegal, and anything they think could cause them bad press. I think with the, and I don't like to bring up the politics with this, but with this, I'd like to bring up that some of the politics of Austin have gotten in the way of policing here by defunding the police. And I see that as a huge problem. I had to call 911 on a drunk driver outside, on the street outside, that hit a cement wall, and there were no police officers to respond because so many have resigned and retired, and they're not replacing them. And the only emergency personnel they could send was 2 big fire trucks. And the officer, the firefighter I was on with, was basically the captain here. He said that there was no police to respond, that they had to wrestle the guy into the ambulance and take him to the hospital to get a breathalyzer, they would do that and then call the police and have them take care of the situation. Fire departments are carrying handcuffs. So all this coming in, there is just, law enforcement is under attack. Even just our symbol of the thin blue line, which means a lot to us, especially those of us that have lost friends and family members in the line of duty, that even just the symbolism of the blue thin line, which is erroneously called white supremacist or oppressive, is under attack. And you see police chiefs that don't have any backbone, that are also eliminating any usage of that by their officers and reprimanding them if they are.
Robin, it sounds as though that from your perspective, it sounds as though from your perspective that politics it seems to be getting in the way of policing. I know that Robin has written a number of articles about a variety of different topics that she has worked on, and I think what we're going to do is to make sure to send links around to some of those, because I know that a number of the issues that she's worked on, specifically as you mentioned, are human trafficking, as well as some things that are timely because they're related to Iran as well. But Robin, thank you, and I'm going to move on, if I may, to. Can
I say one thing?
Yeah, please.
It's going to be my final point. I think what's important to overcome this politicalization is strategic communications out of the police to cover what the media doesn't cover, especially here in Austin, where crime has shot up and homelessness is just out of control.
No, absolutely. Thank you. We're going to move on to Marc Black, and Marc is a retired NYPD officer, spent 20 years and focused on areas of counterterrorism and investigations and so on. So, Marc, if you would spend a few more seconds talking about your background, and then proceed to your 7 minutes or so.
Yes. Thank you for having me on this panel discussion today, what's happening in policing issues throughout the United States. Yes, retired detective, 20 years experience with the New York City Police Department, recently retired. Worked in computer crimes, arson explosion squad, as well as counterterrorism, conducting security and vulnerability assessments, and a survivor of 9/11. With that said, one of the pressing issues that I see happening throughout police departments in the United States because of this movement of anti-police sentiment is the brain drain. And I don't think the public is fully informed or appreciates what this means. Now, my colleagues who are on the podium today who will be discussing police issues all know that this policing, law enforcement, is a vocation. It's a vocation like becoming a plumber, electrician, even a surgeon. And what do you need that's so important with this type of vocation? Mentorship. What happens is when you have mass exodus of experienced personnel in any police department, that experience leaves forever. And granted, I say granted, everybody's replaceable. But what mentors do, which is so important to policing, is that when they leave their departments, they leave insight and knowledge for the next generation of policing. And this is not just for the rookies who are coming on board. This is also very, very relevant for the experienced law enforcement professional within their departments or within their institution. Why? Because one's career is not sedentary, it's fluid. You might start off on patrol, you might end up in a detective squad, and from a detective squad, something that's very technical, such as a bomb squad, a computer crime squad, an arson explosion squad, something along those lines. So you always need mentors. And what I say to the people who come to me, what's happening with these mass exodus, I see the things that are going to affect your community. directly is the lack of experience that's happening within the department. And as one of my colleagues alluded to yesterday when we were speaking, it also hits the supervisors as well. Even if you're going to be a supervisor, you still have to come up through the ranks with experience. You don't want to put people into positions that don't have the experience. Knowledge, insight of the mentor is not replaceable by the training, policies, budgets, monies. It takes time to cultivate this vocation. And police departments throughout the United States, by having this vast exodus of experience, puts their communities at risk. Why? Well, who's the first person if your house is burglarized? Who's the first unit that you're going to call if there's a homicide or a murder in your neighborhood or a rape? You're calling 911. Even a traffic condition, the police are responding. You want the most efficient and effective police force out there. And what mentoring also provides, which is so important, it's so important that not only do you leave a knowledge and insight with the next generation coming up or those who are filling in slots in different units, what you're also providing is confidence and high morale. And morale throughout the police departments today in the United States, and what's happening and what's pushing this is the anti-police movement, are leaving units, and what was alluded to before by Robin, leaving police departments naked without the personnel. This has a direct correlation to your community. And what I say to the public, and when I say to people who even approach me, is all policing is local. It is completely local. Those are the men and women who are going to respond to the 911 call or to that traffic condition, that investigation, that detective who you're going to end up working with, or even a police call. If you lose the experience, the potential of an individual, the criminal, getting off on a technicality, paperwork not being done correctly, prosecutors not having the full case, you don't want this to happen. You don't want this to happen. And that's what I see, which is the major challenge of policing throughout the United States, is the brain drain. And we don't want that to happen. And we have to have common sense policy from everybody when it comes to police-related issues.
You know, Marc, let me ask you a question. First of all, can you touch on some of the things that you saw in New York over the past year, whether it's in New York City with the protests and so on? Just to give us let us, and by the way, Larry and Martin, as you speak, maybe you can also just talk about some of the things that you've seen from your perspectives as well, whether it's riots or protests or something that affected that it would affected the agency that you at one point in time represented. But can you do that, and then respond once you do that? Tell me or tell us how the lack of mentorship might have impacted the response that was actually seen in New York.
So I'll speak from my personal experience, because I just recently retired, and that's when the riots were taking place and everything like that. So what happens is, if you have low morale and you're not confident in leadership, back to leadership again, as Robin had mentioned, and the politics, and I'll use the term, if no one has your back, and I'm talking about having your back when you're in the right, you lose confidence about going onto the street, because you always have to look behind your back. And that's what caused a mass exodus within the department when I was there. Now, mentorship, you have to understand, when I go into mentorship, people don't say, oh, raise their hand, I want to be a mentor. The people who are sought out to be mentors are those who showed that they have a competency within their skill set, whatever their discipline is within the police department, and other law enforcement professionals gravitate to them. What happens is, and it was happening in the units that I went was at, and my fellow units that I had left, is that experience leaves. Now, some of these technical units, such as Robin had mentioned that she was working with a unit that did post-blast investigations. This isn't something that, because I worked in A&E, arson explosion, these aren't units that you just sit in, take a training session, and that's it. It might be a 2-year run-up, what we call a 2-year run-up, to maybe you start to feel comfortable and competent. And there might be training that is structured in such a way that you have to do it. But along that way of getting trained up and the run-up, you have mentors guiding you. And what happens is when those mentors leave, it could put the unit, the new investigator, whoever it might, even a supervisor, because everybody moves within these large departments and even smaller departments. You want to move up. You're not sedentary in your vocation. You want to improve yourself. You want another challenge, whatever it might be. But you need someone to show you the ropes. And that we have seen where if one leaves a particular unit and there's low morale because of the politics, because of what's happening internally, whatever it might be, that leaves a big void on how law enforcement will perform in the future. And we're not talking here, when I say future, a few months. Remember, I just told you some of these skill sets take a few years to develop before you become a productive investigator. So it could be years down the line, even if one is going to be working patrol in the city. For instance, a mentor might work with a young rookie patrol officer. This is how you should speak to somebody. This is why we're going to do it this way. The streets are looking at us right now. Let's get this person away from the street so they can be more confident to speak to us to find out what has happened. You know, little things that they might not teach you in a structured training environment. That's so important. And what's that called? Experience. And when experience leaves, it does not come back. So once again, not to sound like a broken record, what you want is when the mentors leave, because everybody's replaceable, when the mentor leaves, what you're hoping for is they left enough insight, knowledge, and personal experience, expose that individual, whether they're a rookie or a seasoned veteran going into another discipline of law enforcement, with enough knowledge that they have the confidence, which will boost their morale, which will boost their productivity and make them more efficient, more effective. You get bad guys into cuffs. So there's a case for the prosecutor to put these people in prison.
Thank you. Let's move on to Larry Cunningham. Larry retired after 20 years in the Secret Service. Yeah, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, Larry, you headed President Reagan's advanced detail as well. So quite an extensive career, and I look forward to hearing about that. And also, I'm gonna pose the question to you now, rather than I posed to Marc. Maybe you can include it in your remarks. Is what you've seen and how you over the past year or so, and how the agency that you once represented may have handled certain aspects of it. So I'm just adding that question to you at the beginning before the end.
All right, and remind me if I don't fully answer that. Good morning, everybody. Larry Cunningham. I come to you with a lot of experience, but I also come to you in humility because the kinds of problems we're facing, I think requires a collective effort from everybody's diverse background. Certainly law enforcement, but also reasonable and sensible, well-considered individuals that may want to solve problems as opposed to point out problems. The purpose of this is to address the state of policing. The reason I feel confident that I can address some of it is I come to you with 20 years of training and law enforcement experience from the Secret Service. And the Ice Ages, back in '74 when I started, we investigated forged government checks, counterfeit cases. We supported protective details. And we also did a considerable amount of work with disturbed individuals. From there, I progressed to our Office of Training, where I learned a lot about training. To pick up on what Marc just explained, I feel like training is a vital component of any organization, certainly law enforcement. There's nuances and sensitivities and protocols that are unlike any other organizations. So I really focus on training, and that'll be a theme here eventually. After that, I went to the Presidential Protective Division. I was honored to get that assignment, and all the things in my life, plus the early law enforcement experience, came together, and I utilized as a foundation to further expand my understanding. Key on all of that was dealing with the public, dealing with other law enforcement. And my mother once said that don't get too high on your horse there, because you know, you're only as good as your last workout. You're only as good as your last effort. And I took that seriously. So I took her advice and ate a piece of humble pie every day, slowly. I realized that no one of us is as smart as all of us, and collectively we can make differences. And speaking of that, we're talking about the circumstances of law enforcement today. Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm very optimistic. Despite all the negatives and all the problems we've had, I'm optimistic. And the reason I say that is because the folks that we're talking about, law enforcement and responders, are professional, they're committed, and they're resilient. Case in point, they respond unconditionally to calls. They serve the public unconditionally. Candidly, they don't check to see if the 911 call is coming from Antifa, Black Lives Matter, American citizen, a foreign citizen. They respond the same way. And I think that galvanizes and crystallizes their professionalism. Unfortunately, that message hasn't gone out. And so I want to address that kind of culture and that kind of commitment character when we're trying to tackle this problem. Most effective problems are solved when you deal with sort of a multi-factor perspective. There's no one solution. There's no one perspective. We have to look at solutions from a multi-factored perspective. Sadly, the George Floyd death the summer of 20, really laser focused the nation's and the planet's attention to policing. And unfortunately, folks that had the mic, folks that had the mainstream media leaders from a variety of camps were able to steer the narrative, and candidly, they diluted the real message and the real mission of what police do. It's unfortunate because that kind of thing became the narrative. So where we are right now is we're finding ourselves in a place of catch-up. We're trying to fix this misperception of what police do. And it's a very sad circumstance because there are so many issues that have been negatively affected, emotional issues, financial issues, political issues that have been negatively affected and negatively impact the perception of what police do. So as I said initially, I'm optimistic, but the magic $64,000 question is, what in the world can we do? And I'm thinking we need to go back to the basic mission of what police do. They're community protectors. They make life safer so we can live a normal life. That mission, that commitment to the public has been diluted, sadly. So I think we need to, at whatever way we can, multitude of ways, to really explain this to the public in a very compelling way. We can't do it by ourselves. We have to do it with leaders. We have to do it with politicians. We have to do it by our example. And again, I wish this solution could happen and give a timeline to it, but sadly we can't. So that's my first thing. We need to really understand that we are, law enforcement in general, and the responders are really the friends of the community. They really are not folks that want to cause harm. And sadly, that's going to be a major hurdle to overcome. Here we are in early 2021, but I think it's solvable. The other thing is I need to think we need to appeal to leaders and forums in an open, hopefully bipartisan, apolitical way to tell them just that. We are here as a support to the community, a backbone of the country. I famously say when I look at these things that these efforts to defund the police, demonize the police, and disparage them and dilute their mission is very sad because it's almost the same thing as defunding oxygen, defunding water, defunding food. We certainly don't do that. That's an apolitical thing. Even the most extreme individuals, politicians on the right or left, will agree that we need oxygen. And I say that because law enforcement is the oxygen of the community. It really is the oxygen of the country. Without the folks on the street, we wouldn't have a country. And I'm committed to that. I'm coming to you with 46 years, actually 47 years of experience now, balanced by federal training, but more importantly, by interfacing with folks like Marc and Martin, who will speak to you shortly. I've learned what they really do. I've learned their culture, their nuances, their real heart and soul commitment. I've learned that by talking to them, training with them, interfacing with them. So I'm very committed to that. The third solution I might add is try to appeal, excuse me, to our legislators to get that message across in a very compelling way. Explain, this is very simple. We want to improve the country. Please try to remove those kinds of prejudgments, remove those subjective ideas that you've learned from wherever, and just listen to us as people. We're people. We care about the country. We love the country. That message should be explained in more compelling ways to really get past some of the politics that have unfortunately diluted our message. And also continue to serve by example, even in a small way. One example, two examples, it can have a multiplicative effect, whether it's an officer on duty now, an active officer, or retired folks like this. In forums like this, I think the message is compelling. I think we can overcome this, but we have to galvanize our commitment now to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Can you say, and this is going to be eye-opening for many because of the unique purpose of the Secret Service, but over the past year, as you've seen things happening, whether it's in DC or elsewhere, what do you think, what have you seen happen, and how have you seen the Secret Service respond?
Okay. Knowing what I know about my vintage, and again, I come from a different era, but I keep in close touch with some of my former colleagues and new colleagues. And I can tell you their commitment to this hasn't changed. Their responsibility, however, has. And major events usually fall under the purview of the Secret Service, which makes it, frankly, difficult because I'm noticing with a relatively small agency, when you compare it to the FBI or to NYPD, or even some of the larger police departments, LA, New York, you'll see that our numbers are relatively small. And so it's an enormous challenge to get their mission across without integrating and working together with all the folks, including the FBI. So to answer the question, it's become more cumbersome, it's more difficult. Because the mission has been spread out in a way, I don't want to say the commitment or the professionalism has been diluted, but frankly, because of the laws of physics, sometimes you can't do it quite as thoroughly as you would like. Sometimes you're at the mercy of simply too many things, too large things, and frankly, sometimes politics inserts its head. I would say that the commitment is the same, but for example, the event at the Capitol was difficult for the folks protecting Pence. They were in an environment where they had competing protective interests. I know for a fact that they have a separate security plan, simply, for lack of a better term, a run, hide, fight plan, shelter-in-place plan. They have mechanisms to do just that. I actually did the State of the Union for President Reagan in I don't want to date myself here, but it was 1982. And I had similar problems because it was after the explosions at the Marine barracks. And because of that, there was some very special attention, very focused issues. So I would say the response is still good, but it's becoming more challenging for a variety of the reasons I set forth earlier and just now.
Thank you.
That answers it.
Yes, thank you very much. We're going to move on to Martin Johnson. Martin is somebody who I've been working on issues for issues with for about 10, maybe 15 years. We've been collaborating on a whole host of issues, and I'm pleased to have you batting cleanup. So obviously, Martin, You have a heavy burden on your shoulders. But that being said, Martin has a unique perspective because he travels the country in his other life outside of the Gold Institute, training local law enforcement on specific matters. So you get a unique perspective, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Martin, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Ellie. My name is Martin Johnson. I was with Howard County, Maryland Police Department for 25 years. I've been in law enforcement total for 37 years. So 25 years of doing it and 12 years of teaching it after having finished doing it, done it. The less than 100 hours ago, 2 police officers were killed in the United States, murdered, 2 of them. Nick Wynham in Stanley, Virginia, Stanley, tiny little place. It was either 3 or 4 man department, was shot on a traffic stop, pulled somebody over, never even had the chance to get out of his car. Bad guy came up, boom, 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 and just killed him. Boom, done. Another officer, same day, Martinez Mitchum, was killed in Virginia. No, I'm sorry, was killed at a high school basketball game. He was doing security for a high school basketball game, and some guy came in, didn't have a mask on, and an employee of the school challenged the guy, said, "Hey, look, you got to have a mask." Little argument ensued. This officer came over in uniform, comes over to help take care of the situation, address it, and the guy is leaving. And as he's leaving, he shoots the cop, shoots him dead. The guy had, on the parking lot, they came to find out, the guy on the parking lot just before this incident had robbed somebody at gunpoint. So 2 cops dead, same day. Did you hear about it? No, maybe not. Last year, 2020, there were 123 police officers killed. Police officers, when I talk about cops, folks, I'm talking about police, law enforcement, deputies, sheriffs, whatever it might be. People who are out there to protect you. 123 were killed in 2020. That's 1 every 3 days. Every 72 hours on average, some law enforcement officer dies as a result of work, one way or the other, be they murdered, traffic accident, hit. There was one just 2 weeks ago, was hit by a car while on a drunk driving stop, was hit by another car and was killed. I personally have lost 2 friends during my 25 years. Tony Sims was killed in DC, and Scott Wheeler was killed here in Howard County. So the point is that there's a lot of public perception out there. You may not have known this kind of stuff. America doesn't know this kind of stuff. What America knows is what they get from television or Facebook or wherever they get their information from, wherever they choose to get their information from. Public attitudes, such as defund the police, come from public perceptions. Public perceptions, and I'm not here to media bash, but public perceptions come from TV news, other news sources, TV shows, and movies. Very few people have any clue as to what the real police world is like, what it is really like to realize from the cop's point of view. There are people out there who will take advantage of, in a criminal way, other people. If there weren't police, if there weren't cops, police, sheriffs, or other law enforcement agencies out there, the strong would survive, the strong would be better armed, and the weak would perish. And that's just the way it is. That's not drama, that's the way it is, folks. That's human nature. So one of my points is that we have to make sure that people have a good understanding of what law enforcement is before and even during the time that they're screaming to defund. So defund the police. I wish I were at some of these rallies. I've never been able to find one, but I wish I were at some of these rallies or maybe at some of these city council meetings where I would love to ask, all right, you want to defund the police? You want to cut their budgets by 50%, 25%, whatever, or eliminate them completely. So if you just want to cut them, which units do you want to cut? Do you want to cut the child abuse unit? Yeah, let's kill that. We don't need that. How about the sex crimes unit? Well, they have like TV shows, so they're kind of cool, so we'll keep them. This is what we're fighting against. It's in a true sense of the word, it's ignorance. It's just not knowing, not understanding. So when it comes down to it, we've got to let the public know what's going on, what the real story is, and enhance the ability of those voices out there who do understand. As Mark pointed out, who are you going to call? Somebody just ran over somebody. Who are you going to call? You got to be able to call law enforcement. So this stuff about defunding the police from those perceptions, absolutely crazy. You may recall that maybe 5, 10 years ago, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, police departments were saying, hey, you know what? We really need more money. We need more money because we need better equipment. We need to have some equipment. We got cops waiting 2 hours for broken down cars to come in some police departments. Back in the day, we were asking for more money. Now, I don't speak for anybody in particular, but we're afraid to ask for money. Some places are afraid to ask for money because what's going on? Oh, defund the police, take their money away. If you take away police money, you take away police people. And those are the people who are there to protect, investigate, catch bad guys. Listen, there are more than 300,000 law enforcement officers in the United States right now. They occupy positions in about 18,000 different police, sheriffs, other law enforcement agencies. Nobody, I will say, almost nobody gets into this job to make money. Nobody's going to get rich at this. I knew that I would never be rich. I was happy, but I was never rich. There's nothing more important to a cop than catching bad guys. Catch bad guys, go home safely, back up your friends. That's the job. And it sounds kind of caveman there, but that's really what the job is. Catch a bad guy, back up your friends, and go home at the end of the day. That's the reality of it. I've been mentoring cops since 1988 in one way or another with field training and other things. And that's the kind of thing that we try to drill into their heads. Let me touch on something that Marc has talked about, and actually everybody's talked about, and that is people leaving. 2 nights ago, I talked with the dad of a young police officer. The dad was a cop for 30 years. His son has been in for like 3 years. And his son's department, because of their leadership or lack thereof, is looking to get the heck out. He's looking at other police departments to go to. He's a good young guy. He's smart. He's strong. He knows what his job is, but he doesn't feel the leadership, and the leadership is not there. In fact, the leadership is sadly lacking. So there are those situations where officers are leaving one police department or agency to go to another, which is a better agency, which is either better, which might be better run, it might be better led, it might be better backed up as far as leadership, backing up the officers. Listen, leaders need to get rid of bad cops. 99.99% of cops are great. They're nice, honest people, and they're human beings, for God's sake. Perception. It's not special victims unit all day. It's not that kind of nonsense. Listen, cops are moms and dads. Nick Wynham, Martinez Mitchum, they were somebody's kid. Cops are human. Cops have been dehumanized. When cops are dehumanized, they become objects. And it's much easier to pick on and throw a bottle at or shoot at an object than it is a human being. Again, the perceptions. Let me run back just for a moment to the guy who is looking for other agencies to go to. Marc talks about the brain drain. Absolutely happens. That guy doesn't have enough experience. I love him, but he doesn't have enough experience to be the brain that's drained. But when you have good people who you've already hired leave, and you're not defunded, you have to replace those people. And when people don't want to be cops because of the public perception, you're going to have to lower your hiring standards. Is that really what we want to do? Do we want to create a situation where we lower hiring standards so that we can get lesser qualified people who have the legal right to kill people? What are we thinking? We cannot lower those standards. We don't want to have situations where we lower those standards, and we can't create the conditions that require the lowering of those standards. So that's just a few of my thoughts. I know we could go into this forever, and I've occupied my time. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you, Martin. I do have a question, but if anybody else has questions as well, we do have that electronic hand. Certainly raise that, and we will call on you. But Martin, I do have a question for you, and over time, we've had we have. I think the deterioration in society has come a long way. And a lot of this I would attribute to political correctness. In particular, I mean, we see that across the board in whether it's in foreign policy, foreign affairs, or domestic issues, and certainly within the realm of national security as well. Has it gotten worse over time, or is it staying the same? And how do you think that this really impacts law enforcement? And I'm going to use an example that you and I have discussed numerous times before, and that was, not, if I'm not mistaken, 19 out of the 20 hijackers from 9/11 were in Howard County, Maryland. Is that correct? Or five of the 20 were in Howard County, Maryland, in a that were holed up in a motel room. People noticed it, but were concerned about the racism aspect of things. Has it gotten worse? Is this the culmination of a long-term problem, these Black Lives Matter movement and things of that nature? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that we have accelerated our hypersensitivity as a society. We have, or I shouldn't say as a total society, because an awful lot of political correctness, or PC for me is political cowardice, is dictated by the screaming few. When we have people throwing tantrums and it gets picked up on the news or becomes obvious, people throwing tantrums, and there really isn't any basis. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't. There's no always, there's no never, right, folks? So when we've got a few people screaming about things that really don't exist, and they get the attention, and it gives people pause and makes them hesitate to talk about something that's going on. We're on this upward trajectory right now of that type of situation getting worse. And it is true. Howard County, Maryland was home for a period of time to 5 of the 9/11 terrorists. And they were living at the Valencia Motel in Laurel, and in another hotel across Route 1 for a period of time. And people did notice them. They were very secretive. Their behavior was odd. And as we teach and preach, it's the behaviors, people. I don't care how much melanin is in your skin. I don't care how you dress. It's the behaviors. It's the strange things that human being is exhibiting that are noticed, that could be brought to the attention of somebody, be it the police or someone else. So what you're alluding to, Ellie, is that they were noticed. They were very odd. They had their behaviors. When they had pizza delivered from Pizza Time of Laurel, they had pizza delivered, and they would only open the door this far. and money would go out, and the pizza guy had to tilt the pizza up and slide it in the door because they were very, very secretive. So people noticed all this kind of that, among other behaviors, but they didn't call the police. They didn't call the police. And when I've talked with the owner of that particular motel, he said, yeah, a lot of people, they noticed it, but they didn't want it. And in law enforcement, we hear this all the time. Well, you know, I think I know there's something going on. I think there's that guy did something, but I don't want to accuse anybody. Well, you're not accusing anybody if you're a member of the public. You can even be anonymous. So anonymously tell us, hey, you know what? Those guys in room 602 at this motel are acting really strangely, and maybe we could do something about it. And we don't necessarily go up and pound on the door and do that crazy nonsense that's on TV and movies. It would have been nice if someone would have called and talked about these oddities, and it came to the attention of law enforcement, and we were able to do something about it. So people generally, many people will be hesitant to say anything because of their fear of being labeled racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, whatever, nationalist, yeah, whatever it comes down to.
Okay, thank you,
Ellie?
Martin. Larry, you had I'm assuming a comment along these lines?
I think it's even more complex. I mean, that basically he said it perfectly, but the issue is the public is an excellent source of stuff the cops may not see for a variety of reasons. Cops can't be everywhere, and they know their neighborhoods, they know their house better than anyone. And so the issue to me, the problem, the obstacle is that when a citizen notices something, they need to be empowered. First of all, they need to understand and discriminate. Is this behavior a problem? Whether it's abnormal in their community or is there some kind of connection to possibly an attack? They need to be educated more to help them discriminate that information. And the second thing that's most important is when they do report it, they have to have an effective conduit so that folks on the receiving end, police, military, whatever agencies, get it. They don't just blow it off, or they take it seriously. And there are an ocean of cases, and I mean, not the least of which is the gun owner in Orlando, where I believe it was Mateen went in and tried to buy body armor and several thousands of rounds. He tried to report it. It didn't much traction. Nicholas Cruz in Parkland, Florida, he'd been proclaiming on Facebook that he wanted to be a school shooter. It was commonly known among his fellow students and former student friends. The police had visited his house many, many times, 39, I believe, for domestic issues. What happens to that information? So I think there's an opportunity there across the board for all of us collectively to help the public understand what these things are, give them a voice and an effective conduit so that something can happen as a result of that. So I see that being a recurring theme as well to take on, to parlay what Martin was talking about. To me, that's a key thing. And that's not going to happen if police are being demonized, if they're being defunded, if they're being devaluated. They are a voice to help protect the citizens and the country. And if I had nothing else to say about that, I would get on the floor of the House and the Senate and explain that to these people. What are you missing here? It's not brain surgery, folks. This is basic. That's my entreaty to everybody.
Thank you, Larry. Robin, I noticed you had your hand up earlier, but so I know you had something else to say as well. So I'm coming to you now.
Okay, I was in the Newark FBI office prior to 9/11, after 9/11, and we had the 19 hijackers all lived in our area, and they went to mosque there. They went to different areas in the neighborhood. They even went to strip clubs. They made comments to strippers. It was one of them made a comment, "Don't go to New York next week." and she didn't think anything of it until we came in and interviewed her later on. They used to call this the Bystander Syndrome when we were down in DC between the different agencies. We discussed that, but I think that is it is a bystander syndrome, but at the same time, it's political correctness that is driving that bystander syndrome. I would say that the DHS and the different agencies that put forth the saying, see something, say something, have made a huge difference. We had an individual that tried to set off a bomb in Times Square, which I'm sure our NYPD associate would know this. It was a street vendor that called and said, there's something weird going on over here. And had he not done that, and they hadn't gotten the bomb squad there fast enough, we could have had a much bigger issue that was going on there. So I just want to point that out. Now, I was the Newark Division's Flight 77 case agent. I ended up interfacing with the community significantly during and after the investigation, specifically with the mosques. I went into one mosque to share with them and be very transparent on why we came to the conclusion of who the hijackers were, because they were thinking that we were just being racist, basically. So I went in, about 16 imams came in, and of course I stuck with their traditions, covered my hair, took my shoes off, put them some, and waited to be invited into the office because I'm a female. But I went through each and every step I took and that my investigators took on Flight 77 and how it narrowed it down to who the hijackers on that flight were. Then I shared with them a little bit more about how we determined the other hijackers. By the end of that meeting, they were totally on board with, if they saw any odd behavior. They invited me to come speak to their congregation, both male and female, and usually female doesn't go into the side of where the men are. They invited me in. They invited me to community events, special events they had, and I made a point of attending those because at the time we were looking to get out into the community more. I'd say the FBI does that pretty well. We do go out to eat in restaurants and such and introduce ourselves to people just when we're walking through town, especially if it's where we're responsible for. But right after 9/11, we saw that as essential. And what I have to say about the people of Newark is right after 9/11, they knew we were working such odd hours and such long hours. I didn't go home for 3 weeks at a time. The people of Newark, they rolled their grills down the street to our parking lot. They brought food, everything. They fed us. They've had a huge thank you party luncheon for us. They knew we weren't eating. I mean, we were surviving on Mountain Dew and Krispy Kremes. Come on. These guys, I mean, you have the best food in the world in Newark. Italian restaurants, mom and pop bringing food down there. So I do want to say that, people out there back then really realized what we were going through. And I think we need to recreate that because we don't need another tragedy to take place to recreate that. That's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Robin. By the way, I will say I can think of worse diets than Mountain Dew and Krispy Kreme, but that's just me.
For 2 months,
we
were all over the place.
Exactly, I hear that. So we have a question from Susan Yoshihara, who asks us: has the U.S. Policing community faced this faced the challenge it faces today at some other time in history? Where do you think it should go for lessons learned to chart the way forward in the current situation? She uses the example of how the military used it. Military faced similar situation post-Vietnam. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, I would, please. Robin?
I do. My grandfather was a Newark police officer. He was the top shot in the state of New Jersey. He didn't rub off on me on that. He was there during the riots. where people were shooting at the fire trucks and the EMTs. And his job as a sniper was to be on the back and protect and serve. After all of that, he decided he wanted to be on horseback so he could go through the community and talk to people. And then he was stationed on Broadway. And if you know Newark, there's a little standing almost box that the police officer standing there. Right before he retired, he was voted by the community as their favorite police officer because he took the time to go out there and try and get people to realize that you can trust the police. And so I learned a lot from that. You know, when I went back to Newark, I said I was taking back the streets. The Newark PD kind of laughed at me, which was kind of funny, but I learned a lot from my grandfather. He did it. It went from ground zero of during the Newark riots and hating the police to, you know, him being, even though being the head sniper, him being voted, they did a special story on the Star Ledger about him, about how the community, and they had community quotes, and it was just incredible to read.
So thank you. I'm going to pose one question, and then we're going to, with this, we'll close. I'm going to ask each one of you in a bullet point format. So, you know, just straightforward. If you're sitting in front of lawmakers, you're in front of the president yourself, just the two of you, no one's there to, and you have his ear. Give me one bullet point of how you might recommend a solution to this crisis. Martin, let's begin with you.
All right. Well, if I were nose to nose with some big decision maker, I would encourage that person to recognize, get it solid in their own mind, recognize that 99.99% of law enforcement officers in the United States are nice, normal people, moms and dads, who have chosen to go into an unsafe job to protect the community. And so what do you think about that? I would try to lead to the inescapable conclusion that you have to support law enforcement. If for no other reason than one of the ones I started out with, which is if you don't have law enforcement, don't bother with laws. And what are laws there for? They're to protect the community. So recognize that they're out there to do the job. They want to do the job, and support them whatever way you can.
Thank you. Larry Cunningham.
This is a continuation of what Martin's talking about, but I would give them the most fervent entreaty, please, that you value your oxygen, you value your food, your water, you value your country, unquestionable. Please understand how vitally important the mission of law enforcement and related responders are. And I would invite you to come to a typical department, maybe large, medium, and small. And if you had the time, watch a day-to-day officer or officers perform their mission. I know getting Biden to go out on a ride along, or even Reagan for that matter, might be a challenge, but if they could actually get some real down-to-earth insights on the day-to-day, what are they faced with? What is the challenge, and what's their mission? I would say it again. They get a 911, they go. They draw on their training, they draw on their commitment and professionalism to keep the village, city, community safer. I would just tell them to try to humanize it, as Martin eloquently said. These are people, and these people are a vital part of why we have the democracy we do. Clearly, you want to preserve that. Please give this some more attention. Try to help everyone understand what the mission really is. Thank you.
Excellent. Marc Black.
Yes. Well, two words, common sense. Before you go down the road of a policy, before you go down the road of politicking, before you go down the road of defunding, let's bring some common sense back into everything. Everyone here, as you heard from all the panel, Who are you going to call if you need law enforcement at your door? Law enforcement is here to protect and serve society, no matter what community you are in. It doesn't care what side of the aisle you are, what your politics, your religion, your color. It doesn't care. We're coming. The thin blue line is here to protect. No questions asked. They are going to protect society and your community where your children play, where the schools are, where you work, and where you reside. And as I said before, with a common sense approach, it is up to the voter to really think about their local policing. Policing is local. We're here in your backyard. We're here in your community to help you, to assist you. So let's bring some common sense back to the leadership who have to make these policies, who have to then look at the police departments, who have to look at the bureaucracies, and let's find some common ground where everybody can be served more efficiently and more effectively.
Thank you. Robin Gritz.
Okay, Larry took my point, but I'll expand upon it. And I'll also, what Martin had also said, 99% of the officers, agents, law enforcement are good people who don't like bad cops. Absolutely do not. So what I would like to do, I'd be prepared to do this. I would ask them to join me for a week or two. Come with me. I'll take you to police department, get you on ride-alongs. I'll also let you know that we're going to have a little event with family members. So you learn from the family members why their loved ones are in this position or have taken this stance to protect and serve. Again, common sense is key, but I really think that even now, I feel it is my role right now, even not being active in law enforcement, being outside of law enforcement now, is to still represent law enforcement and do that. And I personally feel like doing that to the Austin City Council. I think the Austin mayor's a little lost. He needs to go. And I was running for mayor, but now I'm moving out of Austin. But I do believe they need to take the time to get to know these people and, get to know the people that fight human trafficking, that protect victims, that protect children. Go for a 2-week ride along, and I would go to different states. I'd volunteer to go to their state. I'll take you to go to your state. I'll find a police department. We'll do this.
No, thank you, Robin. I want to thank all of our panelists today. I think this was a very basic but very much needed conversation to have for people to get to get a certain sense of the internal feelings that are happening within police departments. Now, I want to be clear that is something that I said at the beginning. None of our panelists are, shall we say, active duty. None of them represent the agencies or departments that they once were part of. They do represent the Gold Institute, and what is. But it was important for everybody to have an understanding of the basis, what we're working. This is the baseline. This is the feelings that are within law enforcement from a variety of different agencies, from the largest law enforcement police departments in the country, probably the world, NYPD, to Howard County, Maryland, which is, I would say, a moderate-sized police department, to the Secret Service, and of course, the FBI. We had a really well-rounded discussion about the internal feelings that our law enforcement are dealing with right now. Over the next several months, we're going to have continued conversations that will move forward, that will be more focused on specific happenings or activities that we have experienced and that we will be experiencing. Not all of them are bad. Some of them are good. Hey, Well, this is great. We need to have more of this. That could be a conversation. So I don't want to suggest that, I don't want to end on a lugubrious note suggesting that everything is bad. No, things are good as well. And we're going to have those conversations, but this was a necessary first conversation. I want to encourage everybody to pay attention, visit the Gold Institute's website at goldiis.org for continued updates and articles and videos that will be posted by our stellar group here. And I want to thank you for joining us today as well. So I want to thank our panelists, thank you, and I thank our attendees as well for listening. And I encourage everybody who is watching the recording of this to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, so you'll be aware of our future videos. Thank you very much.